Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the Town of Wheatfield Town Board meeting for December 5th of 2016. Before we start the actual board meeting, we do have a public hearing this evening, and that is on a solar law. Over the course of the last year, there have been several instances where companies, individuals wanted to come into town and contract with farmers or other persons on standalone solar units. And when we looked at our law, it consisted of a single line having to do with putting trees or buildings in the way of somebody's solar collector, and nothing else. So we knew we had to do something. 6 or 8 months ago, we charged the task force to come up with a version of a law that we thought we could work with. They did a great job. We had a very good group working very diligently. Looked at other town laws to see what they had done, looked at the state rule requirements, and then as we got closer to where we wanted to be, we hired a consultant, Drew Riley from Wendell. Drew took a look at that and has made suggestions. It went back around through the engineering focus group to the task force. It's been through the planning board, and now it is before our board. I'd like to try and get that done this year. I don't expect it to be done tonight as far as the finished product, but I'm hoping from tonight's information and the input we get that we can actually have a law in the books by our next meeting so that people can make decisions and can decide to build and what's lawful to build next year. They need to sign contracts early enough to be able to get building done next year. With that said, I'm going to introduce Drew Riley from Wendell, and he'll take us through the discussion on this law, and we can take as much time as we need.
Good evening, Town Board and citizens. I'm here to do a quick presentation. Did anybody not get the handout, which is kind of just a summary of the law? The law is a 13-page law, but I did do a nice little one-page summary. Supervisor gave a great introduction. I don't have to go through, but we spent a long time doing this. We used the state model law, which is given by the state. There's been a bunch of training programs going around. Almost every community in New York State is adopting a law like this because of the changes in energy and solar units and wind turbines and things like that. But this law is addressing solar. We're addressing 5 forms of solar installations. The 5 forms are, and I've learned a couple, a building mounted system, not a roof mounted, but you can actually mount them on the side of the building. We'll have rules and regulations for that. Building integrated systems. Now you can buy roofing systems that actually have solar in part of the roofing system. So we have rules for that. We have the standard rooftop systems, which you see all the time. We have ground mounted systems, which is something that's been coming up and forced us to kind of look at this, is people putting systems in the backyard, mounted in their backyard. And then, which is really new, or at least around here, is utility grade systems where people want to rent 20 or 30 or 40 acres of land, put up large solar arrays, and sell that power to the grid. So we came up with the rules for all 5. Now in general, the slight general requirements, building integrated systems, in other words, those that are inside the roofing systems or whatever, are allowed everywhere. And it's through the building permit process that you're doing something. Obviously you're building something, and the building permit process will take care of that, and you're allowed to install those systems anywhere. Second one is the rooftop systems and the building mounted systems. Those on the side or on the roof of the building, those are allowed everywhere. We're going to allow them everywhere, and they're through a building permit process. So you would come in and get a building permit just as you do now, except the state law also has, in the model law, has some great applications. So it's not like a standard building permit application. There's certain things you have to submit, and there's certain requirements in the law. So again, anywhere in the town, rooftops, building mounted ones anywhere in the town by building permit. Now you get the more complicated systems. And it's in your handout here, the ground mounted systems, the ones going on the ground in people's backyards. In our residential districts and your commercial districts, your PUDs, and your M1 and M2, pretty much all the districts in the town, you can have a ground mounted system. It's considered an accessory use. You have some use on that property. You want to put a ground mounted system that'll help you with the power requirements of your house or your business or your industrial use. So you can put those in all those districts with site plan approval. You would have to go to the planning board to get site plan approval for those ground mounted systems. In the R1 and R2 and R3 and RW lots, which are a little different than the ones above, those are standard residential, where you just have residential lots. Those we're suggesting they can go in those by site plan approval, but you need a 20,000 square foot lot. Now, with tonight's public hearing, the purpose of drafting a law is we're getting comments from people. We sent this law out a month ago to get comments, and even before tonight's meeting, this is the first comment we got, and we kind of like that comment, is that we restricted it to the minimum of a 20,000 square foot lot. Well, somebody came to me and says, well, in the R1 zone, the R2 zone, I can put a 16,000 square foot lot on a house. Are you telling me that I have a house in an R1 subdivision that I can't put a ground-mounted solar system in? So our suggestion, and it was a great comment, I forget who gave it to us, is that we would change it to, and it says here, note, we would potentially change that to 16,000 square feet, because that's the minimum lot size that's allowed in the town. That's probably, you could do that in that lot. Okay, so that's what required for those districts. These are for built ground-mounted system as they're defined as ground-mounted systems. Then utility systems. Now, by the way, I say as defined. Say you owned a house on a large piece of property, say 20 acres of land, and you want to put a larger system that sells most of its power to the energy grid. That's all you're doing is building a system to sell to the energy grid. You would be considered a utility system, because you're really, the purpose of it is selling power to the grid, okay? Or there's a definition of a utility grade system which is in the code. So if you're not defined as a ground-mounted system, then you're defined as a utility grade system. The only problem is that utility grade systems are only suggested to be allowed in the AR zoning district, the M1, M2, and M2 district by special use permit and site plan approval. Now, that was a question raised by, I think, one of the town board members, or Supervisor May and others, is that we're allowing it in the AR zone, we're not allowing it in the RR zone. We have a lot of farms in the RR zone, and those are the people that are being approached to potentially use their properties for utility grade systems. So the suggestion was, should we allow it in the RR zone? I'm trying to see if anybody's on the committee here. Yes. We thought not in the RR zone, because these are big scale utility grade systems that we thought, and again, it's up to the town board and public input, that we thought the AR zone was really truly agricultural, large scale. The RR zone is one of those transition zones that, although we have agricultural, we also have subdivisions, and we thought it could create more conflicts in there. So that was the reason we made that original decision, just allow them in the AR zone, but we would be listening to the public and to the town board and others that maybe we should allow it in the RR zone also by special use permit and with site plan approval. So that was the second one that was brought up since we had proposed the law. Then in the law, there's general criteria. There's a bunch of general criteria. First of all, there's general criteria for rooftop and building mounted systems. Those, again, are mostly going to the building inspector. There's very simple requirements. You have to meet the fire prevention and building codes that have been updated recently to address solar panels. Matter of fact, in a lot of communities where I've done this, and I've done it in dozens of communities, is that is a concern of the fire department, is when you put rooftop systems, that it's difficult for them to get to the rooftop. In those days they used to have to get to a fire, that those panels remain charged. But now in the new code, there are places that you have walkways around it and other ways of protecting the firemen from that. So that was the reason for that requirement in there. The ground-mounted systems, and these are again not the utility grade, the ground-mounted systems have a whole bunch of lists of general requirements. Those general requirements are like setbacks, how far they have to be set back from the property line. It's 2 times whatever a principal structure is in that district. You can only have it in a side or rear lot. You can't put a ground-mounted system out in the front of your house. It's got to be in the backyard. It can be restricted to 10 feet in height in residential districts and 15 feet in those other districts. Remember, you can have these in commercial or industrial districts. We're allowing 15 foot. In the R1 and R3 districts, we're saying that the total area cannot exceed an accessory structure, and that in all other districts it would be 1,000 square feet. And then if you have a larger lot, you go up to, you can be 5% of the lot area or 10% of the lot area, depending upon the size of that lot. Before I explain that, I'll go back. The other note here was, and this was another comment received, I thought that was a good comment. Instead of us trying to figure out what the accessory use size is, why don't we just put a number in there? So we went in there, and my suggestion is, instead of saying the accessory use structure, just say it's 1,200 square feet in the R1, R2, R3 districts and 1,500 square feet in the other districts. Now, why do I break out the larger lot sizes? Well, if I'm a business or a home on a very large lot, a 2-acre lot, why am I limited to only 1,500 square feet? Well, we say if you have, say you have a 3-acre lot, let's see if I can do the math there, it's 120,000 square feet. We allow up to 10% of that lot to be solar installations, which is about 12,000 square feet of solar panels. So if you have a large enough lot, we do allow you. And this happens a lot with businesses and industries. I own a bigger lot, I have a bigger energy demand, I want a bigger solar energy system to support my energy usage at my business. I don't see it a lot for standard homes because they only have a certain requirement. Remember, if you're building a solar system, solar energy system, I know when you get grants for solar energy system for a house, you can't be just building it to supply, you can't go over a certain amount of the power required for the house. So you're not going to get these big systems in a standard residential house. So hence that's the reason for that. That was also a problem. I got a couple of comments from some people saying, why are we limiting solar installations? And these were from the solar companies who were doing the big utility systems to 5 or 10% of the lot. This is only for ground-mounted systems. The utility-grade systems do not have a restriction of lot coverage on them. But we do have, for the utility-grade system, we have very strong special use permit requirements. So again, going down this list, we talked about the general criteria for rooftop and building and for ground-mounted systems. Then we have in the code site plan requirements. So those projects that have to go to the planning board, we have a bunch of site plan requirements. This also is just standard stuff, things you have to apply for. The next section is the longest section, of the law, which explains what the special use permit requirements are. And again, these are for utility-grade systems. These are typically systems that are 15, 20 acres of, you can imagine, 15, 20 acres of solar panels. We have requirements for those. First of all, we have a requirement that they be on a minimum of a 5-acre lot and up to a 100-acre lot. That was another question brought up. Why are we limited to 100-acre lot? Why don't we just say minimum of 5-acre? And if you have a 500-acre piece of parcel and you want to put a utility-grade system, why can't I do that? Pretty good comment. The other thing was people were worried about the setback requirements. If you're doing one of these big utility systems and you abut next to a residential district like an R1, R2, or R3 district, we say you have to be 250-foot setback from a residential. The setbacks to an industrial, a lot less. If you're adjoining an industrial property, it's only 100 feet from the property line. Again, these are big installations. Any property line setback has to always be a minimum of 100 feet. The building or structures, you have to be 250 feet from any building or structure. Again, a clarification, it was brought up, very good point, is that it should say building or structure off of the property. If I have a building on my property, I'm leasing it, I don't have to be 250 feet away from that building that's on my property. Okay? You have to be 500 feet away from any specific home, park, or school, and the maximum height is 20 feet, and it goes on and on about other requirements too. You can, though, say that I'm putting a large utility-grade installation in, and I'm adjoining a residential house or a residential structure, and it's the only one in the area, but it's forcing me to be 250 feet back from the property line, and I really want to put it closer to the property line, I have the choice of negotiating an agreement with that adjoining property owner to get a reduction of that. Because really all you're doing is protecting that adjoining property owner. If that property owner wants to enter an agreement with that proposal, probably get monetary reimbursement for that, they could enter into that and have a less setback requirement for that specific use. So we do have that requirement. We also have maintenance requirements. We have removal requirements. So it's going to have removal. All the laws in the state of New York have the removal requirement. Because the fear is you put in these big utility grade systems, again we're talking utility grade, that they go in and then all of a sudden they're outdated or not working correctly, they have to be removed. You're talking about 20 acres of solar panels and they have to be removed properly. So we have rules and regulations for how they have to be removed. So that is a synopsis of the law. I'm going to turn it back to the town board for questions, and then the town board can get comments on it. There's been a copy of the proposed law on the town's website, but if anybody here tonight, I do not have a lot of copies. I have some copies of the law if you want to look at it. It's a 13-page law. I did not make copies for everybody. We were assuming people looked at it. So first, town board members, did I explain? Do you have any questions on the law that's being proposed?
Perhaps before we get into questions here, Dave is the gentleman who ran the focus group that did all of this work. Is there anything you'd like to add to Drew's discussion?
I think Drew was quite thorough. He's put into the law, and I think it's quite clear what we're going to do.
Okay. And then we'll go to the board members. Does anybody have any questions or comments? If not, we'll open it up to the floor. Does anybody on the floor have any questions or comments? Sure.
If you're gonna put it on the roof, on the ground, okay? Yep. If you're in an R1 or R2 or R3 zoning district, what the zoning is of the property. But typically it's about 2 times the building setback, which most of them are around 10 feet or so, 15 feet. Right. Well, this is for the principal structure, not for accessory. Right. So in the standard, right, in most of the zoning districts, and again, we say principal structure, in most of the zoning districts, a 10-foot setback. In other words, your house has to be at least 10 foot from the property line. We're expecting 2 times that, or 20 feet, if you're going to put in a solar installation. And the reason that's one of the reasons we wrote this law, that it can impact your adjoining property owner by having a unit like that. Also, it helps to protect the whole issue of, you want to be a little further the property line because it's controlling that issue of sky space. You know, somebody puts one 5 feet off the property line, the neighbor wants to put up a tree or something else, and they're blocking the solar rays. So by putting it a little further back off the property line, you'll tend to have less problems like that. It also has to go to the planning board for site plan approval. So they're going to look at the issues and the joint property owner and how it may impact them. So again, we're covering that, protecting both sides. We're allowing it, because we heard loud and clear that people want these type of systems, but it has to go through site plan approval because it could impact the joining property. Typically around 20 feet off the property line. You won't be able to put it 5 feet. That was the old code was accessory structure, which was 5 feet, and that's where we're running the problem. When someone puts something that's 5 feet off the property line.
Okay. Any other comments, or questions? Yes. Joe.
Well, that's interesting. The town engineer is here. New York State right now is considering, and you all know, you probably heard through blue in the face that the state has ruled about if you disturb more than an acre of land and have impervious surface, you have to have a stormwater plan. Right now, my understanding, the state of New York still considers solar panels not impervious surfaces because you have ground underneath, so the water runs off and onto the existing ground, so you don't have to have big detention basins, whatever. But because we go through a special use permit process and a site plan process, if the design was different than that and had problems with enough impervious surface, they still would have to meet the requirements of the stormwater law. So in other words, if I designed a utility grade system that had lots of roads leading into it and a lot of areas that had impervious surface, we would add up that impervious surface, not the panels themselves, but what's on the ground. If that adds up to over an acre, they probably would have to meet the SWIP requirement of the state of New York. So that's why you have such use on the site plan. You need to see the specific information. You can't just say, carte blanche, you don't need to do stormwater.
Is there any requirement to keep the area vegetated?
Well, that's part of the site plan process, is that those areas have to be vegetated and maintained. Typically, a lot of the solar companies let them grow up to a certain point, because you realize you can't grow to a certain point and then it's blocked, so they keep it as grasses and other things underneath. But they do have to have access ways, depending upon the site, so they have to put roads and access ways to maintain those systems. Right, right. That could change in the future. That's the state of New York interpreting. They could change that interpretation in the future. Right now, they don't count the panels themselves as impervious surface. Anything on the ground, obviously.
Just in case anybody doesn't understand what a special use permit is, it's a process where the developer or owner would bring their ideas to the planning board, and the planning board reviews the ideas against the law and can issue a special use permit, can put requirements on that permit, or they can deny the permit if it doesn't meet the conditions that are required.
It's a little higher level than normal site plan approval. Special use permit says that may or may not be allowed unless you meet all these requirements and prove to the town, burden of proof upon the applicant, that you meet those requirements, will they get that special use?
So it will not be, it's not that every installation is gonna come to the town board, but any larger installation would come through the planning board. Smaller installations would still go through just the building inspector. Any other questions? Okay, we are very unlikely to act on this evening. We'd like to hear comments. If you feel uncomfortable in speaking about them and you want to come in and talk about it, feel free to. If you want to send us information, if you've considered putting one of these on your own property and you want to talk it before the law is passed, please do so in the next couple of weeks, because I hope to take action on this at the next meeting. There are a couple of other questions that Drew had asked right on the website, literally right on the website, that we still have to finalize. So we probably need until the next meeting.
They're mentioned in the handout, what actual things we need to do.
So, if there are no more comments or questions, very good then. I will consider the public hearing closed.